Let's talk about Andor. And why would I open with this in a Star Trek show? Well, Andor is currently running on Disney Plus, and it's glorious. It's media that takes the viewer seriously and makes you think about life. Sounds familiar? If you are an older Trekkie, it should. If you're a younger Trekkie, it might not. And that says all you need to know about the current state of Trek. My solution would be to try to get Gilroy to replace Kurtzman. This is the review of Champions, and I'm your host, Grandmaster. With me is a powerful panel made up of the finest champions Sakar has to offer. Let me introduce them to you. First up, voice only, we have Mr. Lord Deathman. How are you?
I'm doing well today, thanks.
Next up, on camera, we have the original Mr. Taylor First. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you.
And last but not least, our ensign straight out of Starfleet Academy, learning to be Trekkie. Merv, how are you, man?
I'm fantastic.
This is episode 17 of the Star Trek Project, where we'll be reviewing Star Trek, all of it in order of release, kinda. And today we're going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 7, the final season of that show. Before we do, I want to ask you all to help us out. Like and share this video, subscribe to our channel, and if you really want more of us, you can join our ranks. Go to Sakar at freeforms, sakar.freeforms.net. Whoa, I need to quit drinking, apparently. Set up an account, you can get to know us, and yes, you can join us in our shows. As mentioned before, we will be discussing the 24 episodes of season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation today. 24 because there are a lot of doubles in this season. But we start with Descent. And I want to know, Merv, Descent, the Borg, did you like it?
I did. Yeah. It's always interesting seeing the Borg again. They feel like a relentless race out there in, I guess, the never-ending galaxies or whatever the limit to this show is. I really enjoyed Lore being a part of this. I thought that was pretty interesting. And his manipulation of data in this really felt. I mean, it was just hard to watch in some parts whenever he's actively, essentially betraying the crew, not of his own accord, obviously, but, being influenced. I really enjoyed Beverly in charge of the Enterprise, even though it was a skeleton crew there. While Picard, Geordi, and Deanna were prisoner and trying to work things from the inside. And I like that we saw Hugh again, I think his name. The character from Iborg that grew emotions essentially, and basically, according to this, like defects from the Borg as a whole, and kind of starts his own like splinter cell group of non, I guess Borg, you know what I mean? Like kind of their own free thinking individuals, which is an interesting thing. Yeah, I enjoyed this episode or these two episodes, I guess, quite a bit.
Taylor, season 7 does a lot of callbacks to earlier events in the series and ties them up nicely with a bow. And Descent was kind of the first one to do that. Did you enjoy this episode?
Yeah, Descent definitely tied up a few things, or at least advanced some things that had started earlier. Of course, Data's whole quest to be human and to have emotion, of course, was a huge part of this. And it turns out at the end of Descent, part 2, he's not quite ready to have the same full range of emotions that humans have at that point. It's a really good 2-part episode. Merv covered, a lot of the good stuff. I think this 2-part episode is the first time that we see phaser rifles in the Next Generation. And of course, we'll see a lot of those in Deep Space Nine later on. But I don't think they utilized that particular piece of technology previously in the Next Generation. I could be forgetting an episode somewhere. But
I think you're right.
again, with the reference back to Iborg and how that affected the Borg, and how this group of Borg now was basically worshiping Lore because they had lost their connection with the Borg hive mind, or whatever it's called, because of the events of Iborg, and now they were, you know, serfs to Lore, who was planning to take over the universe. But again, it's just a real strong episode, especially for Data and his advancement. And I was also that Beverly was in charge of the Enterprise there for a little while, because the rest of the crew had to beam down for the search and everything. And her and some other junior officers who were filling in there on the bridge uh, were able to use that ingenuity, use that uh, Starfleet training and their experience, and they ended up destroying the Borg ship through a very clever maneuver. I believe, if I remember right, they went into the sun and created some kind of wave that came out and destroyed the Borg ship. Again, good to see everyone, you know, growing in their roles. But yeah, good episode all around.
Yeah. Lord Evan, sounding off on Descent.
Yeah, it's a good two-parter. Not my favorite of all of the two-parters that you get in The Next Generation, but still incredibly strong because I think Brent Spiner manages to carry it in the dual role once again of Data and Lore. And Lore's always been a character that is not just like a favorite character, but he's really an interesting character in that clearly he's just deeply psychotic and sociopathic, but you wonder like what the origins of it was. So uh you try to empathize and you say, okay, I'm Lore. I woke up one day on a colony with a bunch of all these humans. I'm incredibly smarter than all of them. I'm stronger, I'm faster. Like, would that have as a part of his activation and becoming conscious in the world sort of just led him to this malignant narcissism that is just so pervasive in the characters' attitudes. And the writers on the show never relent on Lore's. He just doesn't have an ounce of empathy for anyone, and he clearly sells himself as this savior to these Borg who are in crisis. They found individuality. They don't know how to react to it, and he's presented himself as this false savior that can kind of give them the answers when in fact he has no answers. He's just sadistically experimenting on them and using them to kind of amuse himself and gain, no pun intended, to get Data. But I did find that some of the supporting cast in this, like Troy, is kind of underutilized, and their primary roles across this two-parter is to just kind of stand and be prisoner, right? Like the bad guy making speech, and I'm in the crowd just standing to be prisoner. Then you get moved to a holding cell, and they try to give her a few lines and a few ideas that she throws out there, but again, I think there's just some underutilization. But the most memorable parts of these two parts for me are the conversations that Geordi and Data have about his ethical subroutines have been disabled, and he's about to perform this very invasive and destructive procedure on both Picard and Geordi, I believe. And those conversations where they're trying to realign Data come off to me as some of the most strongest dramatic work in the series. But I would call this a very good two-parter, but it's probably like in the bottom of my top 10 of your Star Trek two-parters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I totally agree with all of you. I'm in the middle. Um, it's time for a section called Grandmaster Picks. And in Grandmaster Picks, I get to decide 3 episodes where our champions need to talk about before they can throw in their own picks. And this time for Grandmaster's Picks, I have chosen the following 3 episodes. Number 1 is Parallels. Number 2 is Lower Decks. And number 3 is, of course, All Good Things. So, without further ado, Taylor, let's have it.
Uh, Parallels is a good episode, but my favorite part of that is at the end when all of the universes converge in one place and we have hundreds of enterprises from all the different universes, and there's a little bit of cross communication between them, and we see that one of them, Picard was killed by the Borg. We see in another one the Borg had won, and the Federation was practically destroyed, and so on. So all the different things that could have happened if things had happened a little bit differently. But it was a good episode all around. Um, Lower Decks is a fun episode. I'm glad they brought back the character from the previous episode who was in the academy with Wesley when they got in trouble for killing that guy with the stunt with the ships. And I'm glad she was there. I liked that Picard was giving her an opportunity to make up for her failings at the academy, and he gives her all gives her a chance, and she steps up to it and she does really well, and then she ends up being killed in the end. So again, a pretty powerful story there. And then of course the finale of all good things. I'll be honest, it's better than a lot of series finales I've seen, but I don't think it's a really great series finale. I think there was a little bit too much of the time jumping around and bringing in, all the way back to the beginning to the first episode with Q and all that, and how it ended with Q is still testing humanity. It felt a little bit like a bit of a retread to me. It wasn't horrible, but again, just a little bit too much of the time space mumbo jumbo. Um, I think I would have preferred it if it was just more of the crew just interacting in the current time and place. Again, that's just a personal preference. It wasn't a bad series finale, and of course, it did do some things really well. The wrapping it up of all the storylines, and basically the crew still being together and closer than ever before. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on those 3 episodes.
Mhm. Yeah, Lord Deathman, didn't you think that? Well, I'm gonna ask. Season 7, these 3 episodes, Parallels brings in the idea in Worf's head that he could have a relationship with Deanna Troy. And of course, we see in All Good Things that has consequences for his relationship with Commander Riker. Didn't it feel a little bit forced to you?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to step out of the closet and say that I was okay with Worf and Deanna, and I know that that's a very unpopular kind of fan sentiment, but I thought the two of them worked together. A lot of folks say like, "Oh, no chemistry," and it seemed kind of rushed and it seemed forced. And to some degree, I capitulate that because it was very abrupt, seemed weird and sudden, kind of like Chicote 7 of 9 flavor, right? But that being said, I still think personality wise that they were a good pairing. Of course, nowhere near, to avoid spoilers for Merv, nowhere near who Worf is going to end up with in a very legendary Star Trek romance, but still one that I thought had merit. So I do fall in the minority with thoughts on that relationship.
Yeah, Worf got around during his appearances
He
in
really
Star
did.
Trek.
He
Yeah,
really
yeah,
did.
yeah,
He
yeah,
really
yeah.
did.
And since he wanted to proclaim everyone as his mate. So yeah, guy got busy. But anyway, your thoughts on those 3 episodes?
Oh, absolutely. Starting with Parallels, that's a barn burner to me. I just completely love that episode. I think people who are kind of struggling or straining against the multiverse in modern media with Marvel movies or like every other sci-fi show that's on TV now, this is the proper way to do like a multiverse story. I really love that episode from beginning to end. It comes from the mind of Brannon Braga, who is a very famous writer when it comes to Star Trek, especially for TNG. He always wrote these, kind of high concept episodes, and this one really is no exception to his sort of high concept thinking in terms of what can be done with a Star Trek story. I particularly like the idea that, Worf's about to pass out, like he just had some bad seafood, and then like what when you come to, you're in a total another world. It feels like a job I had a while back. It's like, oh, really? We're doing this now? What universe am I living in? Um, but yeah, I really like the idea that that this had to be a playground for a lot of writers or people in the writers' room that had ideas that got rejected, and now you kind of get to put them together into this wonderful pastiche. I think you get some insight into Worf as a character, and not just like what he thinks of himself, but what fans think of Worf and how we feel about him. He's not the guy that goes to the bat lift competition and comes in second. It's for Wharf. It's our Wharf. It's champion grandstanding. So I feel the connection to the podcast and his the trophy that he wins at the Batlet tournament. It's just a great kind of like Twilight Zone meets sci-fi meets Star Trek kind of episode. Love that episode. But moving on to our next candidate in the list. Um, whereas I've got a lot of love for parallels, I also struggle with all good things. On the whole, I do really think that it is an incredible series ending in terms of the scope and the scale of the story that they wanted to tell. I think using Picard as the point of view character was a strong choice just because Patrick is such a great dramatic actor. And I love the kind of relay. I love the way you start in this future with the Enterprise crew pretty much separated from each other, and maybe not having the best feelings towards each other, or maybe kind of working things out, and wanting to be seen as more than they were when they were serving on the ship. But that's not something Picard is ready to kind of let go of. So I like the way they kind of come together one at a time, piece by piece, to form the core of the crew that we had before in this future. And it gave us a peek at then what we thought could be a definitive future for this group, because that's the thing about Star Trek series that ends. Like, what happens, beyond the edge of the frame? That we're done with this crew, and you wonder as a fan. You're like, oh, like where did their careers take them? What were their next assignments? And of course, you got all these books and beta canon to kind of go through that. But I think all good things tried to scratch the itch of the fan who's like, and if you're wondering what 1 or 2 decades down the line looks like for these guys, so here's a little bit of a hint. So
Mm.
I thought that was a great. I think it's a great episode, but again, my problems stem from, I think it is what Taylor was saying. I tend to agree. The story of the anti times does feel a little convoluted at times. The way you had to coordinate the neutrino beams and all of that. But I feel like that was all just window dressing to tell the dramatic story of the characters at the core of this show, and to do that dramatic piece. So it doesn't bother me too much.
Mm.
Um, and then finally, Lower Decks. I think that's a standout episode. Obviously, I think it was the inspiration for the Lower Decks show that's been long running at this point. But getting outside of the sort of officers club, seeing what it's like for people who are newly minted in the fleet, and their career aspirations, how they function as a team. All of that is great, but I think one of the greatest underrated heroes of the Star Trek: The Next Generation show is definitely Ceto Jaxa. We knew her from that tragic episode with Nova Group, in terms of the accident that happened at the Academy, and she more than redeemed herself in this episode. And I always like to think of her as being someone that would have been remembered in the history of the kind of Enterprise crew. Yeah, just great story, great teleplay. I love the script for that story, the way the younger folks sort of interact with each other. They have their own version of Guinan, like low rent male Guinan. Um, that's for some reason kind of caters to them. But yeah, just the whole sort of redemption, sacrifice, cost of duty kind of thing, trying to suck up to the boss to get your slot in command. All of it felt like, things that happen to people, but still keeping that emotional maturity that you get with Star Trek characters. No one's trying to do an end run around somebody else to get a promotion. These are perfect Roddenberry beings, but put in a realistic dramatic scenario.
Merv, let's hear from you. Did you enjoy season 7 as a whole, as closure to this show?
As a whole, yeah, yeah, for sure. As closure, I don't know. It doesn't necessarily feel like a like a finale necessarily. Not
Mhm.
necessarily the episode that was a finale, but doesn't feel like the end of the line for these characters. I think that, I mean, just getting right into it with the all good things, it feels like the point is the exploration. That kind of feels like what uh, Picard's revelation in that episode was. Like, it's the exploration is kind of the point of the whole thing. I feel like that was kind of almost a meta way to tell that to the fans in a way. At least that's how I took it, was that it's not necessarily about like this big bombastic finale. It's about just what's out there, and seeing what comes at you, and then um, again, just continuing with that one episode was, make sure you keep your friends together. Make sure they don't drift apart and you lose everything along the way. So yeah, I thought it was decent, but again, it didn't really ring finale to me. It didn't really
Mhm.
ring end of the line necessarily. And I know there's still movies. I don't know if any of the movies technically or come before this season
Nope.
7, or if they're all post
Nope, it's
show.
a clean leap right into the movies after the end of this show.
Okay, so I mean, even that, just like for me, knowing that there's several movies I still have yet to watch, I know it's not the end of the line for me. I don't know if any of the
Mhm.
movies feel more like an end of the line or what, but just knowing I'm going to see a lot of these characters again, it doesn't necessarily feel like a send off necessarily.
Yeah, in fact, actually, they started production on Star Trek: The Generations, the first movie, right after they wrapped up season 7.
Yeah, there was like a
Yeah.
2-day break between the end
Yeah.
of filming this finale and jumping right into the next movie.
Enjoy
So,
your weekend.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah,
happy Monday. We're doing a movie now? Okay.
yeah.
Something like that.
But yeah, I guess touching on the other two episodes that you picked, parallels. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I'm pretty sure Worf is my favorite character of the Next Generation. Every story he's involved in, I get interested in. I don't know if it's just him, or if it's just the Klingon thing, or if it's just the actor. I don't know what it is about Worf, but I love pretty much every situation he finds himself in. Whenever he's the focus, and he was the focus here. I bought him and Diana, or Deanna,
Thank
as
you.
a couple. I really enjoyed them together. I think I mentioned it last season whenever they were in the holodeck together. I was like, they got a little bit of chemistry here, And then, like, of course, here the whole second half of season 7, it felt like they were kind of like courting each other a little bit. And obviously, this is like the first, like, the eye-opening moment for Worf, where in all in 90% of these other universes, you guys are together, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm missing an opportunity here.
Right.
So I really enjoyed that. Now I have to agree with Taylor that, like, the end, whenever you see all the different, like, potential universes, especially the one where the Borg win, that I just like a little bit more of a peek into that universe. I don't want to live in it. I just want to peek inside and see what's going on over there, because that looks like apocalyptic to me. That kind of terrified me a little bit, actually. So that was really interesting. Lower Decks might have been the most emotional episode that I can even think of, going back for these several seasons. And it was a character that I barely knew. I mean, like, we don't barely get to know Sito. I think that was her name.
Mhm.
But whenever they announce her death, it's like it hits everyone. It hits them hard. And I know, like, this isn't a show that, like, this isn't Game of Thrones where you're losing characters on a weekly basis or anything. But this is, you know, there are stakes, and I think that's really what that drove home. And the other big thing about that episode, outside of just all the characters that we get to know for this one episode being pretty interesting, just to see their dynamic at play, but their perspective of the superiors, of the characters that we normally follow, felt different. Like, I don't know if anybody else felt this way, but like, I don't remember the character's name, but the one that's working with Geordi, I felt like Geordi was kind of being a jerk. And I'm like, Geordi never feels like a jerk to me, but like, he really felt like he's just like putting this guy down and like, don't bother me
Yeah,
now. I'm
yeah.
about to go to the chow hall. Like, I started getting like, is something else gonna, like, I wasn't sure what the plot was gonna be. Is there gonna be something else going on where like these group of ensigns, or are they gonna have to work together to like overcome, or is the higher ups being manipulated somehow? But it didn't go that route. It felt like we're just telling it from a different perspective. Like this, in thinking about like the real world, like people in the workplace all the time operate differently when you're with either your peers or your superiors or your underlings, the people underneath you. And I feel like we got a little taste of that. Was like, this is how some people see, some of these characters as superiors, and it's handled a little bit differently. Now, even like the scene with Picard and Sito, whenever he like reams her out for the incident, I know he's trying to do like some backdoor manipulation thing, like trying to get her to go a certain way, but I felt like that was kind of harsh. I started to empathize with her, like, Jesus, like, cut her a break, like, she's sorry, but in the end, it all, comes together, and it led to a really emotional moment. I think probably one of, again, like one of the most emotional moments I can think of in this entire series, and it was, again, it was for a character we barely knew. So
Mhm.
kudos to them for making me care. Yeah, I thought some of these were some of the best episodes this season, and just as a season 7 slash all of the next gen, I've really enjoyed this show a lot. I really think it adapted and evolved the Star Trek method of storytelling here to make everything, it hits a lot of different corners as far as like what you want out of a television show. Some of them are funny, some of them are deep. It goes in so many different directions. There's always something interesting to take away from it.
No, agreed. By the way, Jordy was just acting towards that Vulcan like humans usually do act towards Vulcans in Star Trek, because they are not really popular. Strange enough. A specific Deep Space Nine Take Me Out to the Holosuite episode comes to mind. But anyway, Lord Deathman, you had a follow up.
And you just stole my thunder. Uh, that's that inside joke for people listening to the show. But yeah, Jordy was acting like a jerk, and he was acting like a jerk because the person who's taking the brunt of it is a Vulcan, the
Yeah.
universe's supposed biggest jerks.
Well, yeah. Um, uh, no, I'm not going to go there. Okay, we have discussed my picks, and as you may know, we are all fans of Star Trek, even Merv nowadays. And we all praise Star Trek all the time, that it's oh so great, oh so fantastic. But there's one episode in season 7. I dared the panel to pick it for their picks, and I had somebody who had to pick it. So now, you know what? We're not going to keep it under the rose. We're going to talk about it. Sub Rosa. Lord Deathman, your pick, so you can start. Is
Indeed.
this the worst episode of Star Trek ever made?
Uh, the worst ever made. I don't know if I can go there, but the worst of the Next Generation, that series. Yeah, yeah. This is not a great episode. It still kind of makes me cringe. I remember being oddly confused watching it for reasons that a prepubescent kid is gonna be confused watching that one, and I just looks like oddly embarrassed for everybody involved. Like, how did this happen? Right? It's. I think somebody was like, we have to ramp up the sexiness of this show and kind of do something for the ladies. I don't know if that was the impetus of the show. I've tried to look it up too, to get some people to just go on record to say how this happened, right? But instead, you get kind of like a lot of people who have hindsight, as in 2 or 3 decades on, and they all are like, "Yeah, I knew that episode was bad while I was making it, but I didn't want to say anything." And you get a lot of this kind of posturing, and I'm like, Gates, you were kind of like number one on the call sheet for this one, and now you're talking some smack about how, yes, this one wasn't so great for the ladies, and I'm like, you took the paycheck. So, so I'm kind of confused here. But putting all that aside, so what is Sub Rosa? First off, the title refers to something that's a secret that's meant to be kept under wraps. But this is a foray into gothic romance, and I would say it's kind of an erotic kind of thriller episode that involves a ghost and stormy nights and a colony out of space that's somehow a recreation of Scotland. There's like a weird creepy handyman in it. I mean, we're really going towards like adult entertainment in the softcore world in terms of like the setup of this episode. um there's even a moment, and I have to say it on the podcast, The Champions, where it looks like Gates is going to help herself. She's like in a rocking chair and just looking, like she's in the mood, and it's really hard for me to watch it. It's like, should I just fast forward here, and leave Gates to her me time by herself? Yeah, it's a cripplingly weird and bad episode, right? And then it gets campy. Like just when you're feeling embarrassed for everyone, it turns into this like some old grandma comes up and gets resurrected, and leave my nana alone. And I'm like, this is just madness. Like, what is happening in this episode of Star Trek? And then somehow they managed to bring it back to like they ramp down all the tension and end it with like a nice kind of summary. Welcome back to work, Gates. I hope your time, on the planet was cool. It's not a great episode, not a shining moment. And I tried to look for something redeeming in it, like somebody underneath a control panel trying to sabotage the weather system. I just couldn't find it, and I
Yeah.
hope some of the other panelists here can kind of help me out. Yeah, that is Sub Rosa.
Yeah, we rarely do that with your picks, but I give the champions Merv and Taylor a chance to sign off on Sub Rosa as the worst episode in the Star Trek: The Next Generation. Merv, you want to go first?
Sure, I didn't really think it was that bad. I mean, listen, it's not great, but I feel like it was on par with a lot of some of the original series episodes as far as like wacky, witchcrafty. It doesn't really fit sci-fi as a genre of storytelling. But yeah, there's not much to take away from it either as far as like, well, I'm going to remember this and take this going forward because yeah,
Well,
it just did. It felt like it was for a whole different genre of television show. It was like they swapped the scripts with something else. But
mm,
yeah,
I promise
That,
you will remember Sub Rosa every time you watch The Next Generation,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
know it's coming. Taylor, any thoughts on this, or you just want to skip it?
Well, no, I don't. If you'll indulge me, um, first of all,
I would.
Gates McFadden looks great in this episode, so good, good for
She
her and the
does.
costumes and everything. And she was ready to get seduced by this ghost that's apparently been doing it with every woman in her family for the last 600 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Ghost got game. That's all I'm going to say there. But I do want to give a shout out to the actor who plays the ghost, Duncan Rager. He's one of my favorites. Um, quick history. In 1983, he was one of the stars of one of my favorite shows, a show that was a decade ahead of its time and got canceled way too soon, called Wizards and Warriors. If you can find it, it's fantastic. He appeared in 1985. He appeared in the series V about the alien invaders. You
Yes,
remember that show?
yes.
1984, he was in a miniseries, made-for-TV miniseries called Last Days of Pompeii, where he plays a gladiator, and he did a great job in that. 1985, he played Errol Flynn in a made-for-TV biopic of the great actor. And in 1987, he played Count Dracula in Monster Squad. Now, Monster Squad is just like Ghostbusters, okay? It was a movie in the 80s with the same title as a kid show in the 1970s, but had no relation whatsoever to the Monster Squad kids show from the from the 1970s. The Monster Squad movie is a really great movie if you haven't seen that. If you want to know where, one place where Stranger Things and Skeleton Crew got some of their inspiration, check out Monster Squad. And Duncan Rager did a great Dracula in that movie. Then from 1990 to 1993, he was in another show that was maybe a little bit ahead of its time, where he played Zorro in the cable TV series. And he does appear in DS9 as the other characters later in 1997, 98. So anyway, he's a really good actor who throws himself into it and does a great job, even when he's playing something as ridiculous as this horny ghost in Sub Rosa.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, while we're at it, can I have your first pick for this month?
Yeah, as far as episode, I just wanted to mention Gambit Part 1 and Part 2, which isn't a spectacular two-part episode, but I like it because Picard gets to do some different things. He fakes his own death and then joins up with these pirate mercenaries to find out what they're up to, and he has to role play a lot, especially when they capture Riker. He has to role play that he's someone else, and he gets to be brutal and mean to Riker and everything. And of course the guest star in those two episodes, the guy who plays the leader of these mercenaries, is Richard Lynch, who's one of Hollywood's great villains in the 80s and 90s. Appeared in many TV shows and movies, including he was in an episode, a two-part episode actually, of the original Battlestar Galactica. So just a quick shout out to him. But I just think it's a fun two-part episode in the middle of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Merv, you also picked the episode to talk about.
Yeah. One episode I picked was Firstborn, which deals with Worf as a father, and I think it's the only Alexander episode in this season. But anyway, he's Alexander is coming of age, and he is about to enter his Klingon warrior training, essentially, and he doesn't want to because he's, instead of spending his life being raised a Klingon, he's been living on the Enterprise for the last several years, and doesn't really relate to a lot of the Klingon culture, it seems. So Worf takes him to I don't remember if they took him to Klingon or whatever, but he goes to a planet and sees like Klingon stuff going on. It's like a almost like a street play or whatever you want to call it. Like street performers are enacting some Klingon history, and then this elderly man shows up who's also a Klingon and kind of saves the day and gets in good with Worf and Alexander. And it turns out that this elderly fella is Alexander from the future, who's come back to change Alexander from the past to be more warrior-like so that he can save his father's life in the future. It's a whole big thing. But the crux of it is really Worf as a dad. In I've already mentioned Worf whenever I was talking about the other episodes, but he's my favorite character, and I just like seeing him. He's in all these situations all the time where he can't just fight his way out. If he could fight his way out of every situation, he would be perfect, but he can't. So it's really interesting to see him dealing with being a father. We get a little bit, we don't get a lot of that through the last several seasons, despite Alexander being on the ship. But whenever we do, it's always interesting because it feels like he's learning and adapting as he goes, because it's not his bread and butter. He's not naturally good at this, so it's always interesting to see that relationship. And I thought it was executed pretty well here for both of those characters. And I think a lot of times, like a child actor or just a child in a show like this might come off as annoying, but I never feel that way with Alexander. I don't know if it's just because Worf's involved or what, but I really enjoyed the way that this all went, as far as Worf's parentum and Alexander as a child and a character in this show. I like to see where both those characters go. So
Taylor, that actor that played Older Alexander, he shows up in a lot of things. Do you have any new things about him by any
I,
chance?
I do not. Off the top of my
Oh,
head, I don't know which actor that was.
but at least he also appears as different characters in Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager later on.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
in Deep Space Nine, he plays a scientist closely related to Odo, I think, and in Voyager, he plays a war criminal who has hurt Neelix's Neelix's species.
Species. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we will see him again in different roles. Keep an eye on that, Merv. Great pick. Or Deaf Man, you had another pick.
I did. I have a pip called Interface, and it is a Geordie centric episode of the series. And I've always found it. I guess you could call it minor Star Trek. It's not the most well known or beloved episodes, but I enjoyed seeing some insight into Geordie's family. We didn't get a lot of that prior to season seven, and it was also interesting just to see a black character who stereotypes usually want to portray them, as coming from troubled backgrounds or dysfunctional backgrounds. But Jordy has two highly functioning parents who are command level officers in the Starfleet. So he comes kind of like from a legacy in terms of the his feelings for service. And in this episode, it explores a catastrophe in which it is believed that his mother has been killed. And I think LeVar Burton does some very strong dramatic work in the episode that consistently gets overlooked or underrated by the fandom in terms of how he deals with the potential loss of his mother. It's not a typical exercise in trauma or breaking down for him. It's a continued sort of denial. He just won't accept it, and he keeps pushing the limits of an experimental technology that's meant to be able to find her or communicate with her. As in the episode, it's theorized that she might be sort of on another plane of existence due to some type of accident. Sci-fi, your typical sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm sorry, plot device there. But the episode has always stuck with me. Just finding out more about his family, and at the same time, following him as he tries to kind of deal with this loss. So, interface is a favorite one whenever I see it.
Um, yeah, thank you for that, Lord Deathman. Um, Murph, you had another pick.
Yeah. My second pick was Preemptive Strike, which shows Ensign Rowe, or I guess now Lieutenant Rowe, coming back into the fold. And she's been missing, I feel like. She hasn't been utilized as much, especially this season, but even last season, I think I only remembered one episode with her in it. Um, so it was nice to see her again because I feel like this is a character that I really enjoyed in I think it was season five maybe where she showed up the first time and she was like scattered throughout and they don't really explain where she was. I mean they do in this episode, but she just kind of disappears without trace up until like she shows up here and turns out she's been training for like elite whatever something or other. But she comes back and she's tasked with infiltrating uh, an anti-Cardassian militia, essentially. And it turns out that Picard chose the wrong person for this because the militia's purpose hits a little too close to home for Ro, and she gets in way too deep. Where she decides that she prefers this militia's cause more than she does the Federation. She feels like she fits in with these people and there's a character who has clear anti-Cardassian background and that sort of thing, so it fits that she would be chosen as an undercover. Unfortunately, for I guess Picard and the Federation, she decides like this is going to be a better life for her. And I just really enjoyed this episode. This was I really love this exploration of her character here because we've known this since her first arrival that she's kind of anti-Cardassian. Maybe I don't remember. Early on, I remember that being a thing with her, and that she is not afraid to do what she wants. Whether or not the Federation says so. So I just really like that she. There's a moment towards the end of this episode where I think Riker is explaining the situation to Picard, and he says like she really came across as she's doing the right thing. The only thing she regrets is that she let you down because like it's not really established before this, I don't think, but her and Picard have like almost like a father daughter kind of relationship in this episode where she wants to make him proud, he wants to see her do well, etc., and so forth. And I really do think that there's a moment here where Picard drops the ball with her whenever they meet in the bar, and it really kind of highlights a little bit of misstep with him, which I think is interesting because they don't normally show him more or less screwing up. But I do think that's here, and I think his blank expression at the end is an expression of that as well. Of like he could have went about this differently. Maybe it would all wound up the same place, but I do think there was another path where Rose stays with the Federation here. But I just really like this exploration of this character, this unexpected twist. I wouldn't have expected her to defect essentially. Um, and I like that their relationship was at the crux, and I also really enjoyed that Riker had a moment with Ro, like in the ship towards the end, because those two characters did have a lot of history in previous episodes, but that kind of got pushed to the side for the most part to highlight Picard and Ro's relationship. But I think it worked well here. I really like the story in this one.
Keywords: Bajor, Cardassia, Maquis. You will get a lot of that in Deep Space Nine and Voyager, so no worries. And that will actually enhance your understanding and enjoyment of this particular episode. Trust me.
Fantastic. I look
So,
forward to it.
yeah, absolutely. Taylor, you had something to say.
Yeah, just following up what you said. I think this is the first time they mentioned the Maquis.
Yeah.
I would have to look at the dates to see if it was mentioned on DS9 prior to this episode airing.
I think there's a two-parter, the Maquis in Deep Space Nine, which is around the same time as this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, of course, the Maquis become a pretty big storyline throughout the franchise. I was really surprised when Ro turned traitor in this episode, and it is a really good episode.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, by the way, do you have another episode to discuss besides the one Lord Deathman still wants to talk about?
Well, just to be fair, there are some weaker episodes in this season that I just wanted to touch on. Not as bad as Sub Rosa, but there are some other weaker episodes. Bloodline. All right. Now, the good part of Bloodline is that Amy Peets, if I'm pronouncing her name right, she appears as Lieutenant Rhodes in a very small role. If you don't know her, she goes on to star in sitcoms like Caroline in the City and other things. She's gorgeous. But Bloodline, if you remember, a Ferengi finds a woman that did the nasty with Picard 20 frickin' years ago, who happens to have a child who's the right age that she also got pregnated around the same time that Picard was doing the nasty with her. And he modifies this guy's DNA to make him pass a DNA test to make it appear that he's Picard's son. He then sends holograms through subspace, a technology that I guess he invented just to do this, all to get back at Picard, who had killed his son in a battle years earlier. Good callback to, I guess, the first or second season or whatever, but holy cow, what a convoluted plot in that one. Okay, so that's one that maybe they should have done a second writing on or something. Emergence is another one where the Enterprise suddenly gets its own intelligence and starts communicating through the holodeck through an Orient Express story. All right, that one was a bit much. And then at the end, it just goes back to being the normal Enterprise again. No harm, no foul, I guess. What were some other weaker ones? Oh, by the way, not a weak one, but Homeward, where Paul Sorvino appears as Worf's adopted human brother, and that's actually a pretty good episode. The episode with, hold on, I'm missing it. I'm just trying to get the title. The one where Wesley Crusher comes back. What a surprise! That makes my bad list. Um, why am I not finding
Journey's
it?
End.
Why am I not finding it?
Yeah, I think that was Journey's End.
Journey's End, exactly. Where, American Indians still acting like it's the 1800s on another planet in Cardassian space or whatever. But that's not even the bad part of the episode. The bad part of the episode is Wesley Crusher is magic or something. We've wrapped up Wesley's story arc, and it turns out he's just freaking magic. and he's just going to go and do great, wonderful things in the universe from now on, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to call out a few of the weaker episodes this season.
Yeah, fair. Let's just say that the strongest seasons in the Next Generation were 3, 4, and 5. I think. Before that, it was good. After that, it was not so great overall. But that doesn't mean there were not great episodes. And Lord Deathman has
Yes,
the
there
last
were.
one to discuss.
Yeah, last one that I will quickly mention. It's called Dark Page. And it's an episode that prominently features Michelle Barrett as the recurring character, Luoxana Troy. And we're very used to seeing Michelle's character, Luoxana, played for laughs as a comedic foil. But in this episode, she gets to do quite a bit of dramatic acting. And I was very surprised at the depth and range that she displayed, even when I first saw it, and I'm continually surprised by it when I revisit this episode. It is an episode that does involve some trauma, the loss of a small child. I won't spoil it here or go into too much detail about it, but I will say if you were looking for a different twist on that character and a cameo from a young Kirsten Dunst. I think is Hedril, is the name of her character. It's
Kestra,
one
right?
you Kestra is the name of the daughter, the
Oh,
daughter that died in the accident. But it's a great episode in just terms of the way it's set up, the heading into her mental landscape, and it just kind of like trying to force someone to relive something that they've repressed. That is a traumatic. Those can always be pretty heavy-handed episodes when TV shows kind of take on that kind of thing, but in this one, it's just done so well, and the story is so well told and staged that Dark Page has always been a secret fan favorite of mine.
That
yeah,
episode
agreed.
brutal. It's brutal. It's
Yeah,
it's
Yeah,
very powerful.
yeah. That's actually one of the stronger episodes in Next Generation. Uh, deals with some heavy stuff, but that's fine. That's we're all adults here. Um, well, okay. We wrapped up the Next Generation, at least this TV show. So I'm just gonna ask around, and I'm gonna start with you, Taylor. I know your answer already, but the original series or the Next Generation? What do you prefer?
Oh, that's not a fair question.
yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
The original series is my preference because it's
I knew
original.
that. I knew
But
that.
but I love the Next Generation. Next Generation is a great
Yeah.
show.
Uh, and not. I'm not saying you don't love it. You can love everybody, but you can love one child a little bit more, and that's fair.
Exactly.
Lord
It's like Elvis and
Deathman,
the Beatles.
asking you the same question: the original
Oh,
series or the
the
Next
same
Generation?
question.
Yeah.
Same question. You didn't have a different question for me, man.
No. No. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Wow.
I want an answer.
This really is Sophie's choice. It's so hard, but like, and I mean by a millimeter, maybe by a nanometer. I give it to TNG. It's the show that I kind of grew up on. And yeah, love those characters, love going back to that space. But uh, Kirk, Spock, McCoy in the original series, it hits like gangbusters too. I'm just saying, if you're forcing me to choose, right, by gunpoint,
I am.
I'll take all the TNG DVDs. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. It's a virtual gun and it's set on stun, but still, I need an answer. Also from you, Merv. TOS or TNG?
Well, if we're eliminating the animated series from contention, I guess I'm gonna go the next generation, primarily because you guys know this, but I like characters, and like Lord Deathman said, the big three in the original series are fantastic, but I think the next generation, with twice as much time, obviously, expands a wider, more eclectic array of interesting characters for me. So yeah, I got to lean towards the next generation, but I have enjoyed both in these past couple of years diving into them
Yeah,
and the
it's
animated series.
yeah, it's 1.5 year already that we're doing this, and we're not done, not even close. That will conclude this month's episode of the Star Trek Project. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion today. If you did, you can help us out. Like and share this review, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and join our forces at sakar.freeforms.net. Just click on the link in the description. We will start reviewing the next generation movies now, but you will have to wait because we're going to skip a month or so. Uh, Somebody is taking a holiday, and yeah, that needs to happen as well. So in July, we will be back with Star Trek Generations. While you wait for that, you can check out our review series for Andor, currently running on our channel, and our review for Thunderbolts. It's out this weekend. So for now, I want to thank you all, also on behalf of Merv, Taylor, and Lord Duffman, and wish you to live long and prosper. Bye.